Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the 2023 HEA Annual Conference. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Leslie Harvey. I'm the board president of the Hawaii Economic Association, and I am up here to thank all of the people who put so much time and effort into making this conference successful. I want to thank all of you in the room for being here today, and all of the folks joining us online. We appreciate you making the time to join us. I'd like to first start by thanking the HEA Board of Directors for their incredible work on the conference, specifically Conference Chair Seth Colby, who has led development of every bit of this conference. Additionally, conference committee members Jennifer Chun, who likely greeted you at registration and was instrumental behind the scenes, as well as additional conference committee members Colin Moore, Jerry Sumida, and Mike Hamasu. Thank you. Additionally, board directors Carly Liddell, who you also might have greeted you out front, our finance committee chair, and Mike Robinson, sponsorship and organizational collaboration chair. Mahalo for your hard work. Also want to thank our administrative support consultant, Mary Ah Wong, who's only been on staff for a few short months, but was a key ingredient in bringing together today's great program. Thank you everyone for your hard work. We are so pleased to bring this conference to you today, really a continuation of last year's conference themes. Seth has developed quite the lineup for us all, including a special keynote address from Governor Josh Green over lunch. While Hawaii continues to grapple with what feels like falling in the same hole over and over again, we're now confronted with new realities: the pandemic, climate change, the Maui wildfires, making these already complex issues increasingly complex. Today's discussions are intended to facilitate a deeper understanding of these complex issues, and we hope that you'll engage in these panels with an openness to learn something new today. And with that, I'd like to once again thank you for being here, and I look forward to talking with you in between panels and during lunch. Please come say hello, and hopefully at the Pauhana to follow today's event at Giovanni Pastrami's. Now please join me in welcoming Seth Colby, Conference Chair, to the stage.
Aloha, good morning. Welcome to the Hawaii Economics Association's annual conference. The HEA, as we like to call it, is something that we very much work hard to offer a special service and offer a special niche within Hawaii. So economics, I'm an economist, so I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but economics provides a vocabulary in a system for understanding policies and trade-offs, right? And one of the things that's inevitable about any future is trade-offs. And you have to think about what's your priority and what's not your priority. And economics is very good because we like to put prices on everything, right? So we believe that it is essential that Hawaii is thinking about its future, and people like you are here to participate and learn, because let's face it, this community is ours, right? And we have a very diverse economy, and we want our community, but we need to decide where we want to go, and having a clear vision of the future that we can work for collectively is an important part of that. Now, I really want to thank all of our sponsors that are up on this screen today. I do think it's indicative that, you know, once we put together a conference looking at problem solving and the system that has made us the way we operate, so many businesses came and said, this is an important topic, right? And I also think this is also talks to one of the beauties of Hawaii. Hawaii is a small community, and the businesses care about the future of Hawaii. Different stakeholders care about Hawaii, and this is one of the assets of Hawaii, is that we're small. We can get the people together and have a conversation about what we want to do and speak face to face. So I really want to thank our sponsors, and it's also a testament to, I think, our community. I want to give a special shout out to the Maui Chamber of Commerce as our title sponsor here today, and I'm going to let Sherry come up and talk to us, give a few words. Thank you.
No. Well, first of all, in case you don't know me, I'm Pamela Tumpop, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce. Many here in Oahu know Sherry Minor is the president of the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. And I want to say that I absolutely love that the title is it Groundhog's Day again? And at first I thought Paul Brubaker must have come up with that title. But it turns out the conference committee did. And while there's going to be a lot of discussion today about Maui, actually, we've sponsored this before, and we sponsored this year before we knew what was going to be on the conference committee's agenda. And the reason we sponsored this event is because of the important work the Hawaii Economic Association does. So we're proud to again be the sponsor. I wanted to start with a little joke just to see if anybody knows what's the best car to have right now in this economic climate. Anybody? Uber. That would be an Uber. And you might notice that Uber now, every driver has their own little card in case you want to pay them cash some other time. So, you know, they are really getting around quite a bit these days and circumventing systems. But I want to give you a little bit of history. It's my history. And talk about, as we're looking at, is it Groundhog's Day again? Some of the things that I've noted in my career. So back in the 90s, I worked for the Maui Economic Development Board out in the tech park. It was the heyday. We were getting a supercomputer. By the way, that supercomputer had designated access for commercial applications, even though it was primarily a defense supercomputer. Anybody remember high-tech Hawaii, high-tech Maui? We went year after year to Comdex, biggest computer trade show in the nation, and we had a lot of international guests there, right? We were on the cutting edge. We were gonna use this supercomputer and secure a great position for high tech in the Pacific Rim. So then you might remember and then later in my career, that was in the 90s, spent a lot of time doing that. Later I worked as the marketing director for Oceanic Time Warner Cable in the early 2000s. And we were launching digital TV boxes, which could do recording. We were doing Roadrunner launch. These were rapid development launches where we had up very lofty goals. If you know Time Warner, they really stretched the goal. But they had a plan, they had us execute. We did rapid development planning. Teams came together. And while there were hiccups, I'm sure you remember those probably first and foremost, but we got it done expeditiously. And then I went on to United Way, which was right after 9/11. And our economy had tanked back then, you might remember that. And some of the things that we learned when our economy tanks is that drug and alcoholism goes up, domestic violence goes up, mental health issues go up. And so we saw a great devastation with job losses and really challenging times to help our people. And then in 2006, I joined the Maui Chamber of Commerce. So it was great when I first joined in 2006. Economy was good. I had a team of 6. And then the Great Recession hit. And we had to deal with the Great Recession. That was followed by COVID, and now wildfires. And some of the things that I also dealt with when I first joined the chamber was the Hawaii Super Ferry. Might remember that too. I had to go to court and lobby for why the super ferry would be beneficial to the state of Hawaii. Imagine now if we were able to access things from island to island in times of disaster. And then Mauna Kea. So I mention these things because we've had periods of time where we've had plans and we were on this economic track, but somehow we lost our way. Housing has been critical to Maui, not just Maui, it's a statewide crisis. And as a result, in 2017 and 2019, before the wildfires, we were looking at what to do. We held 2 forums, and we've continued that work because during COVID, when others were coming in and raising our median home price, we saw a lot of people displaced. Now our workers were living out of their cars in many cases, so much so that the County of Maui considered a parking lot at a nonprofit where they put security guards to allow families to sleep in their car so that at least they wouldn't be ticketed if they were on the road. And it remains, of course, to have that crisis when the wildfire hit means we're woefully short units. So one of the things we learned in COVID because I'm sure you're seeing all the press that we're seeing and challenged by, is that during COVID, the World Health Organization and the International Monetary Fund said you have to deal with the economic crisis in tandem with the health crisis. You can't separate that. And we're trying to separate that again. Some in our community are trying to separate that again right now, and it doesn't work. What it causes is more crisis. So it's something that we have to come together on. It has to be done in tandem. And then recently, last month in September, a friend I hadn't seen in a long time, Barina Poon, held a Go GBA forum, which was really about how to do business in Hong Kong. And it was talking about what they did right in Hong Kong. And there was this one side with 3 dots. And the dots were, and this is something that, again, back in the 90s, we were going to have this global positioning in the Pacific Rim and high tech. And the dots were simple: a business-friendly environment. Second dot, political will and leadership. Third dot, investment. Now I bring you back to the Hawaii Super Ferry in Mauna Kea because we have to work on building people's confidence when it comes to investment. So we've done a great job on Maui of highly leveraging the visitor industry. We've leveraged it more than our local community can support in restaurant, retail. But it's interesting, I was asked just Wednesday by Angus Mulkelvey on his radio show, is there still more we could do? And there were things that were left on the table a long time ago, but are still maybe relevant today, like medical tourism. But without the strong plan, without the leadership, without the investment, we are falling behind. So I'm so excited that you're going to take these questions up. And one of the things noted in the write-up was, is there too little coordination between government and the private sector? So I'm just going to give you my answer right now. The answer is yes. Okay, I'd just like to get over that right now. The answer is yes. Take me up on it. But we are pleased to sponsor this conference this year. We are thrilled with the program. We're thrilled that it's forward-thinking, forward-looking. It's time for a plan with urgency and priority. It's time to get on with it. Because we can tell you from the wildfires, there were some plans, and this was a unique fire. We can't say that all of our plans, had they been implemented, would have solved this disaster. It wouldn't have. But it might have taken care of some. So it's time we get on with it. Thank you all for being here, for being part of the solution. It's our pleasure to be a part of this conference. Aloha.
All right, so now I'm gonna spend a couple minutes explaining what you guys just got yourselves into. This is going to be a weird conference. And I don't mean like hippie weird, but if you are a hippie, we welcome everybody, so you can be hippie weird. What I'm saying is we're going to do something unconventional here. So please bear with me as I take 10, 15 minutes, or probably 15, 20 minutes to explain what we're doing, because we're trying to do something slightly different, right? So the title of this conference is called Groundhog Day. And it's based on the Bill Murray movie that came out in 1993 about this, he's a curmudgeon guy, and he has to live the same day over and over and over and over again. Right? And it's our political, and the thesis of this one is, why does our political institutions keep making the same decisions over and over and over and over again? And I hope by the end of this talk, I can convince you that yes, we are making these decisions over and over and over again. And a lot of it has to do with the way we structure things. It's our collective decisions and the incentives it puts upon us, right? So let me just start off by doing a little recap of last year's conference, right? Last year's conference was, why is Hawaii so darn expensive? And we looked at, everybody constantly complains about the high cost of living here. And one of the things we really try to do is we try to separate the things that we have control over and the things that we don't have control over, right? So the things that we don't have control over, we are in the most isolated island chain in the middle of the Pacific. We have constrained land resources. So things are always going to be more expensive than on the mainland, right? We are a unique place. However, there were things that we identified that we did have control over. And these are, one is investments in who we are, right? Culture. But another one was like policies, laws, regulations. And one of the things that, it occurred to me, well, let me just, before I do that, two things really stood out to me, two vignettes I really want to share with the conference that really got to me. The first one was, we started off and we had a bunch of entrepreneurs up here and they were just telling what it's like to own a business. And these were the owners of Nalu Cafe, which I kept saying they have great steak sandwiches. They still do have the great steak sandwiches. And they were telling their stories, these two young guys, and they wanted to start a business. And the permitting process had taken so long that they were on the verge of bankruptcy. In fact, they told us here that they're like, we couldn't tell our wives because we didn't want them to worry. And they had to run up and down the hallways of DPP begging for a permit. Now these were tenacious young men and they got what they did. They opened it up, they started a business. Now they have several restaurants, so good for them. But really, is that something we want to happen in Hawaii? Opening up a business is hard. Being a restaurateur is hard. And the least thing we can do is make it easier for them and not make opening the business a catastrophe or like life and death. And one of the things I thought was very important to ask in this was, what was the permits for? I mean, permits are important, regulations are important, but as much as we asked, we could not identify anything that was going to increase the sanitation, increase the structural issues of the place that we were doing. It was lost. So this was time that was poof, gone, in risk. The other thing that we talked that really stood out to me was we had Stanford Carr and Christine Komp, which are two developers here in Hawaii, and who have spent years trying to build housing in Hawaii. And they were talking about what you would expect, all the ropes or the hurdles they have to jump through and the hoops and how everything's expensive. But we asked, what was it like in the 1990s? When, Stanford Carr has been working since the 1990s. And he's like, oh, same things. We're having the same discussions. You're like, what? And in fact, it was easier. There was less regulations. So we've had smart people that care about our community up here have been saying the same thing for 30 years. So these are things that nobody wants. DPP doesn't want them. Our political class doesn't want them. Our business class doesn't want them. They don't want these things, yet we keep doing the same things over and over and over again. So now you're understanding why we're calling it Groundhog's Day again. In fact, part of this, last year I held up this Price of Paradise, which came out in 1992. And it's this book, kind of economics, kind of politics. Some of the people here wrote this, but I'm sure they're retired because this happened a long time ago. And what happened was they're describing the same processes, the same things that we're dealing with all the time. Now, 1992 seems like a long time ago. I was in middle school in the early 90s. I remember sitting in one of my most vivid memories in the early 1990s was I remember sitting in school watching rockets rain down on Baghdad on CNN and having teachers explain why we had to go to war. Right? That was a long time ago. Big hair bands were in things. The perm was a thing. We thought it was good in the 1990s or early 1990s. Kurt Cobain was telling us something smells like Teen Spirit, right? The Soviet Union was collapsing. And here, there was a book launch talking about the same issues in Hawaii. Okay, fast forward 40 years to last year, 2022. 30 years. Yeah, 30 years. So now 1990s is like a thing. Like young people dress up to be the part of the 1990s. It's retro, right? People are like, oh, I've heard of Nirvana. Okay, so that makes me feel old. But the other thing it does, like Iraq is no longer a geopolitical actor, major geopolitical actor in the world. We've fundamentally changed. We have AI, and Hawaii is still having the same economic conversation with the same ideas. So this got us to thinking as an organization, and by the way, this is a conference committee, and we spent a lot of time working together on this, and it was not me. I'm a voice, right? And we talked about this a lot. And this got us thinking about what was going on last year. Okay, so if we've been talking about these problems for 40 years, maybe it's not the ideas. Maybe it's something else. And so let me throw out a couple possibilities of why we're stuck in this Groundhog Day loop again and again. You know, on Groundhog Day, at least we had Bill Murray. He's charming, much more charming than I am. In Hawaii, we just have the same problems, right? And so housing, everybody knows that housing, the ultimate long-term solution for housing is what? More housing, right? But we don't do it. Everybody agrees. So what's going on? This is an interesting question. So let me postulate 3 possible ideas. 1, ideas, right? So maybe we need better ideas on how to do things. But I would contend these things have been out. I work for the state government. I've read so many reports from the 1980s and 1990s, 2000s, 2020s. I write some of them. They all say very similar things, right? So best minds of our generation, same ideas. So maybe it's not ideas. What about people? Maybe we just need new political leadership. Maybe we need the right people. But over 40 or 50 years, we have leaders here. Do you think we've never elected somebody who's talented, capable, and cares about what they do, and who's not selfish? Seems implausible to me, right? In fact, I work often in the legislature. People there care. Business leaders care. Government employees care. So maybe it's not the people. So let me postulate what I think it is today and what we're here to investigate. It's the process, right? It's the incentives that cause us to get distracted and do different things. So ideally in a democracy, you want the government to produce results that reflect the values of the voters. That's what you want. In Hawaii, when you talk to people about values, you hear things about aloha, aina, ohana. I have never heard a value that one of the fundamental Hawaii values is having to wait 6 months to get a permit to redo your kitchen. I've never heard a value that's saying that we need 30 or 40 years to create a real estate development out in Kapolei that was that was decided on by our elected officials. So our political system is having trouble expressing the values of its voters. That's my thesis. Maybe it's not. Maybe we're doing exactly what we're trying to do. Maybe we're acting in such cross purposes with one another that we're stymieing along the way. But that's what we want to do today. We want to look at this process. I don't have answers. I don't think anybody understands the process. But what we do is we want to reveal what's going on. And so what I think of this is, you have ideals, right? More housing, transportation, and we put this up here and we put it in the system, and then the meat grinder begins, right? Legislation, panels, discussions, reports, and people really care. Like, it's not like people aren't doing what they think is the right thing. And out comes this meager piece of sausage that nobody likes. We were thinking, one time, for one point, I was thinking of looking into the meat grinder, the conference. but I figured we would just get a bunch of butchers signing up. But the other way is, another title possibility is, it's not you, it's me. And then I heard all my ex-girlfriends like just yelling at me all the time, and I don't think that's it. But the point is, you know, as we take an idea and we go all the way through, this is us, right? Hawaii actually has a lot of control over the meat grinder and the decisions and the political incentives. There are economic forces, there's federal law, which we don't have control over, but we can decide about how we make decisions. And that's what I want to look at today. So there's a couple possibilities. One, there's a lack of consensus over our future, so we just don't agree on things. Another thing is there's too many veto players along the way. Maybe our state and local governments just simply lack the capacity to do hard things, right? In which case, should they be, it's a disaster to ask them to do hard things. Maybe we just don't. This is exactly what we want. This is the stasis that we want when we add up all of our decisions. So this is an unconventional conference. Most conferences are going to come up here and they're going to talk about ideas. And they're going to be like, oh, you need to do this. You need less regulation. You need to do environment. This is not today's conference. Today's conference, we're going to be looking at the process. And looking at like all the different incentives that are placed on me as a public worker, placed on you, and whatever your role is, and how that produces the results that we call the community of Hawaii, right? And this is really important for Hawaii because administration is way more important than ideas. There's an idea that is often quoted to Goldman Sachs, but you hear it all the time. It's not the business plan, it's execution. And the idea here is you can have the best idea in the world, but what matters more is to have a nimble and organized organization that can respond to the challenges and keep going, right? In Silicon Valley, they have another saying for this. They say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that means you can have the best idea in the world, but if you run it through the meat grinder of a bunch of weird incentives, it's going to be a shadow of its former self. In fact, we're never going to get into it. We only have a couple panels today, and this is what we're going to look at. But if you're really interested in talking about this issue, about the system of incentives on people, I really suggest Recoding America. This was written by a really concerned woman who was, she was responsible for coming in and reforming the Obamacare website. Remember, it was in crisis, and she came in and reformed it. She's dedicated her life to bringing technology and increasing efficiency. And she just shows these stories, these harrowing stories of like why of governments that are so frustrated about unemployment, problems with people filing unemployment, people getting SNAP benefits, people doing things, and elected officials pulling out their hair, and things getting worse and worse and worse. And there's just so many incentives, and it's a really complex environment. So if you like what you're saying today and you're really interested in these ideas, I really cannot strongly recommend that book strong enough. But why is it also important in Hawaii? It's because the voters prefer a strong government in Hawaii, right? Our voters, the values of this, we live in a progressive state, majority Democrat. So we want people to execute, or the voters want the government to take care of our biggest challenges, or at least play a role in it, right? But the problem is, if we can't administer those things, then we got a huge problem going on. Things get worse. And this is not just a problem of Hawaii. I think we always make a big deal out of it. But this is all over the United States, particularly in the blue areas of in California and Washington, D.C., New York. You have these super majorities of Democrats, and they all say their values are to help the people with less privilege, but highest housing costs in the country, takes forever to deliver infrastructure, right? And in New York, it cost tens of billions of dollars to build a subway line that was 3 or 4 miles long. In California, you had the bullet train that cost taxpayers, I think, $20 billion, and it's basically been scrapped, right? So these aren't problems that are exclusive to Hawaii. This is about the process. And a lot of people have been thinking about this, and this is dovetailers onto what the New York Times columnist Ezra Klein calls supply side liberalism. And he has a theory, and so let me explain to that really quickly. He said, in the mid 20th century, we built things. In the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, we built things. We famously built the Golden Gate Bridge in a year and a half. We built the Empire State Building during the Depression in a year. Things got built. But as we were moving into the 1970s, something was happening. We continued to build, but there were problems. Two things. One, we were not taking into account the environmental consequences of that building. So what did we do? We founded the EPA. We started recognizing that environmental impact statements were coming in. And the other thing is a lot of people were not participating in this process, right? There was a lot of marginalized communities and people that did not have a voice. So we expanded the voice. And interestingly, you know, in panel one, we're going to be talking about these leaders who set a vision in the 1970s, moved on. So they were part of this. They were responding like, we need to include more people in the process, right? But that was 40 years ago. And the thesis now is over the last 40 or 50 years, this process has been co-opted by different people with stakeholders, right? And so the idea was never to not build ever again. The idea was to make sure that we understood the environmental consequences of our decisions. The decision was not to allow every single veto player. The meaning was to make sure that leaders from our communities, from marginalized communities, had a voice and that we weren't displacing with them without knowing that. But that's where we are. And one of the things that's like, and here's the thing that we have the most control over here in Hawaii and everything, it's time. You think about the most scarce resource, the most democratic scarce resource of them all, rich or poor, it's time. And processing, taking months to get something done is costly. Time is money. And we all use time as a weapon. I see it all the time in government. You don't want to do something? We need a report, right? I'm not sure about doing something. We want to delay our decisions, and time is costly. And time costs. And we're going to hear from a bunch of builders today, a bunch of different people. Think about time. Just put a pin mark in your head for all the time that we're wasting. And maybe we're not wasting. I'm sorry. I shouldn't get in front of my skis on this, right? Maybe it's important to take time to consult with people. It's important to make sure that we're not doing this. But let's make sure our time is valued. And a lot of people feel that their time is being wasted, and it increases the cost of projects. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I don't know what the solution is. I don't think anybody does. So let's learn the process and understand the costs and inefficiencies of our current system. Then we can use democracy to change things. That's the promise. You know, Einstein has this great quote that I always cite. It's that significant problems we have cannot be solved with the same level of thinking with which we created them, right? So we're always looking for the silver bullet. But maybe it's time, instead of thinking about the one thing that we have to do, maybe it's time to start systems thinking about the incentives that are placed on all of us. So that's what we're trying to do today. Welcome to the experiment. Surprise, you've paid to be part of an experiment. So as I'm going to invite some people to the first panel to come up in 2 seconds, but I want to give some guidance or give some suggestions on how to think today. Is think like an economist when you hear these discussions. And what do I mean by that? It means think about the incentives that are going on up here. Thinking about the costs and the trade-offs that are going up here, the costs and benefits of each one. I suggest not assigning blame, looking for who's at fault, right? I don't think that's we all have our favorite boogeyman, depending on where we're sitting, right? But one of the things that's important to realize is where we stand depends on where we sit, right? So the businessman has to pay his bills, right? The community advocate has to advocate for their community or they get fired. So think about all the incentives that are placed on people. The other thing I suggest us not doing is just looking for ideas. There's a tendency to come up here and say, oh, we just looking for the silver bullet solution. I know it's really important. Like we're in a dire situation, we want to look for solutions right away. You can. My suggestion is not. My suggestion is just watch and see, rather than say, oh, we need less regulations, say, why do we create, what are the systems that creates more regulations? Somebody's doing it, we're doing it all the time, right? Why are we creating a system that doesn't have value? So we have a great conference today. I know you're gonna be an experiment, but we have great speakers no matter what. A big part of this conference is you guys, right? So we're gonna bring in some speakers up here, but I really encourage you guys to talk, to debate the ideas, push back, and talk amongst yourselves, because the idea is this is part of a larger process of understanding where we are and where we go forward, right? We've been trying the same things for the last 40 years. Hopefully today we can try something new and see where it goes. So the first panel is, we got some leaders from the state leaders that were involved from the very beginning in the 1970s. Now, the 1970s was like a very important time. And because it was the last time that Hawaii intentionally decided to go to a place. They said, we don't like where we are, and we're gonna work to do something else. And so we wanna learn from that experience and what they were going through in different dynamics, in case, if we decide to do the same thing, how we should do that. Second panel is we're going to look at housing, the process of building housing. In particular, we're going to do the Ho'opili development out by Kapolei. I know even if you're not interested in the suburbs of Kapolei, I really think it's going to be an interesting panel about how we do things. At lunchtime, we got the governor speaking about the Maui fires. After lunch, we're going to be looking at the rail, right? And looking at how hard it is to provide infrastructure and supply infrastructure, the process of doing that, and what leads to all these cost overruns and delays that are available everywhere. And then we got some of the smartest economists in the state coming and giving us the economic forecast. So thank you for bearing with me. I just wanted to, this is a weird conference, I just wanted to give you guys a prep. So without further ado, I'm gonna allow the first panel to come up. And also, let's give one last thanks to all of our sponsors, and particularly Pamela and Maui for their comments.